Mm, that was interesting. I haven't had that little voice report before, but hello, welcome
Tradition.
to the
Yeah.
listening. Um, Atlas Talisman, where are you in the world this morning? Or for me this morning, perhaps not for you.
This evening, yeah,
Mm.
I'm in Auckland, New Zealand at the moment, which is the North Island right at the top near a peninsula where it splits off.
So is it a bit more heading towards tropical up there? Not quite, but it's
Not quite. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anywhere in New Zealand is really tropical, but if you do go right to the top, it does get a bit warmer and like that. But no, Auckland's stereotypically just wet and green.
wet and green. Sounds a bit like where I came from, Manchester, which was very wet and more grey than green. Always raining, which yeah, I
Yeah.
don't miss that. Um, yeah, the first thing that comes up for me is your name because I've known quite a few people in my life who've sort of acquired names on their journey and for various reasons, something profound life shift or um, just the feeling of they've outgrown that old person and they've become somebody new, and it seems to have a very powerful effect for some people and be a really kind of important part of whatever change or move. Now, I'm assuming that this wasn't the name you were born with, but maybe it was. But can you
Mm,
tell us a bit about that name, if you don't mind?
yeah, for sure. So Atlas Talisman is neither my birth name nor my legal name. And I have that distinction because my legal name is also not my birth name. So the journey of my names, it very much pertains to open world theater as well, that the world is a stage. And this idea of customizing our avatar, reclaiming or rewriting our story and the character we play on that stage of life. And so when I was about 2021, I was using the name Bravo as a stage name. And I really was inspired in my sort of teenage years coming through Commedia dell'arte, which is Italian mask work, working with some really inspiring acting coaches, and went to Johannesburg Youth Theatre, which is where I grew up in South Africa. Also over in Australia, going to Australian Theatre for Young People, and appreciating the town crier, the wandering minstrel, the fool archetype, the stand-up comedian, the person who could name the emperor's, clothes or lack thereof, that sacred clown, this sort of friction point of genius and insanity. And so Bravo was that name for me. And then I remember once watching an interview with Rowan Atkinson because I loved British comedy and uh, The Goon Show and Monty Python and Mr. Bean. And I saw how serious Rowan Atkinson was as a person compared to Mr. Bean and Blackadder and the different characters. And while I'm sure it's a relief for him not to be an idiot in his life, it was a bit disappointing to see that mask. And I really wanted to bring play and improvisation and, I guess, celebration through curiosity in all spaces. I didn't want to have this duality of me being on stage or off. And so I legally changed my name to Bravo Child. So that's my actual legal name, is Bravo Child. And then after about at least 10 years of that, I was in my early 30s, early to mid 30s. I saw the ceiling. I had done a number of comedy shows. I'd done, toured a lot of festivals. I'd started my own festival. I'd done plenty of community work. Yeah, lots of costumes and identities and play and fun. But I kind of, the clown's balloons were going a bit flaccid. I was just like, oh, is this it? Like, is this, it feels like I know the outcome if I just stay in this loop. And so I really wanted to shift and to sort of change myself and let go of a few dreams because I had so many books and video games and board games and festivals and just so many things I wanted to create and leave behind as a wake as an artist. And I thought I need to put some of them to rest so I can focus on a few of them. And so yeah, I decided to get rid of all the color. I used to wear so much color all the time, and bow ties and polka dots and flare pants. Had a curly mustache. It was just very clown like, or maybe now more hipster and and retro. Um, and so I just got rid of all my color. I just started wearing black, and I changed my name. At that time, it wasn't Atlas Talisman yet, but the intention was to go on this rites of passage and see if play and game theory and improvisation worked in the real world, not just when I was on stage, not just when I was in a creative community or doing the kind of things I did in the fringes of Australian kind of art scene, but in a place that didn't soften for me, that didn't accommodate me, because I'm this lovable kind of drifter, couch surfer, like, oh sure, you can have some food here or we'll put you up here. It's like, does the real world also bend to the will of the clown, of the journeyman? And the journeyman was a concept I came across when I went across Australia in 2011 with a project called From Nothing. So myself and two other friends wanted to see if we could go through Australia not using any money. We just had a camera. We bought matching suits, these grey suits with salmon coloured ties, and we went from Sydney into the centre, right up through Australia up to Darwin. And I met Niels, a German journeyman in Alice Springs, right in the red centre. And he was wearing this traditional lederhosen and the hat, and they have a particular garb. And I was really enchanted by this tradition they have of journeymen going out and trading their wares and learning and bringing that information back to the village. And so I thought, well, as a journeyman, I'm not a carpenter, but I bring play and games and the artistry of creating immersive events. So I'm going to trade on that. So yeah, that was when I dropped myself into different countries where I didn't know the language. I went to Greece, went to Spain. I was in the UK as well. Ended up getting caught up in a project that was run in Transylvania and Romania. And at that time, I was calling the game Spinifex, and I actually had a character name called Spinifex. I was calling myself Spinifex, like a tumbleweed. And then I had this idea of these three parts of myself. So the child, or the apprentice, was Bravo Child. And then the journeyman, stepping in towards, some form of mastery. I adopted the name for only a short time. I wanted to call myself Space Cassidy, because I thought Space Cassidy was like this pirate, adolescent, highway cruising explorer. And then a friend of mine said, well, when you call yourself something, you're also asking people to call you up into that version of yourself. So why not just call yourself your adult name or your master name, so it inspires you to grow into that being, even if you're not quite there yet. And at the time, I was going to call myself Zeus Zimmerman. And the Zimmerman was, in German, it's the carpenter, which was inspired by the journeyman. And Zeus, I guess, just the god of gods. But I kind of softened it into something which felt a little bit more human, a little bit more humble. Also spoke of being a traveler of the world, Atlas. Also, I like the idea of holding up the heaviness of the adult world, so there is a space for play and safe space for women and children in that kind of Garden of Eden kind of environment or atmosphere. And then Talisman was, after looking at that card in the deck, Talisman card again and again, and feeling into the etymology of talisman being like at the end of a ritual or an end of a ceremony, a completion of some kind. So the aspiration was to own that, like Atlantis, this juxtaposition between myth and reality. It's like fantasy, but maybe it's actual ancient history. Like, it's this kind of nebulous space. I wanted to exist in that nebulous space, and try and call myself in, or at least towards a completion of self, this continual work in progress of our identity.
Wow, there's so much in there. That there's about a month's worth of conversation that comes. I've got so many things in what you just said that interest me. Wow, yeah, fascinating. Gosh, So it seems like you have this really interesting relationship with everything, really, like with yourself, with the world, a very fluid, it seems, relationship, like almost as if from the outside it looks like you very early on saw yourself or your personality as just something that you could maybe try on or swap, or you had this kind of, or you give that impression. And even the relationship with the world and where you are, and kind of the playfulness of that sort of, there's a real essence there that I'm getting from you, and it does speak to this kind of in between place, between sort of heaven and earth, or the land of the gods and the land of the mortals, or the underworld and the everyday world. It's as if that seems to be your realm when I hear you speak, and that's really fascinating, because that's the place where all the magic happens. That's the place where the changes can happen. That's the kind of catalytic zone where things get transformed from one state to another. Um, and that yet the fool, the clown, this kind of archetype is such a powerful character in all world mythology. The trickster, or
Mm.
I like the fool who is the only person in the kingdom that can tell the king that he's being an arsehole and not get killed, not have his head cut off.
Yeah.
Who can use humor and just lunacy to point at things that are
Mm.
deeply uncomfortable, that the whole culture recognizes, maybe even unconsciously, that these things need to be pointed at because it's somehow healthy to have that vent, to have that thing that can release. And here is the person who actually has the ability to do that. And it seems to me it's an incredibly challenging role. It requires such a broad range of skills, and this fluidity, this ability to have non-attachment, really, which it's a fascinating, it's both a
Definitely.
role and an archetype, isn't it? It's both a role, and it's clearly been with us forever, in
Mm.
human culture since the very earliest days. For sure, the guy in the caves doing the paintings or leading the kind of ceremony, or overseeing the kind of psychedelic experience, or whatever was happening in those very early kind of cultures where they ended up painting on the walls of those caves. For sure, that character was there as a
Mm.
central part.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a liminal space
Mm.
between what you could call the sacred and the profane being more the mundane or the real world. And definitely asks to be a lifestyle because there's just this continual attunement and opening of the instrument of our awareness, whether through the mind or the body or however you access that, into the subtle realms. And I think it's the subtle realms that really incarcerate us or lock us down. Um, I mean, you can have cuffs, you can have, domestic violence, you can have very explicit forms of enslavement. But for the majority, particularly in the modern world, I think it's the more subtle, insidious, that little inky creeping aggression, or that spike where you say things you don't mean, or that little bit of lethargy which keeps you violating your intention on New Year's to your diet or your exercise, whatever it is, or that little bit of bravery to ask that person out, or that little bit of tenacity to hold on to that entrepreneurial dream. But no, I'm just going to go back to what I know. It's that refusal of the call. And so really attuning to that subtle space, it does sometimes leave you adrift or makes the whole world seem kind of unreal, which is a bit disorienting. So it can ask you to be a bit of an outsider, or to wander in a bit of questionable sanity or insanity, um, nihilism, feeling that things don't really mean anything anyway. Because if you go down the philosophic rabbit hole enough, it all starts to dissolve and become meaningless. So, yeah, it's not always a comfortable space. But I think when I look at nature, I wonder if the bee knows that it's there, or from our perspective, to cross pollinate the flowers, or the different functions that termites or the waves might have. I wonder if that holistic service motivates them, or if there's something completely other, maybe just an instinctual urge going on. And I look at humanity when we're doing our things, like, oh, Sally thinks she has to go and see Tim tonight because she's got his key, or this person really needs to go over there because their grandmother's sick, or whatever it is. We've got these subjective spurs, or this catalyst for our action. But then I wonder if there's another role entirely that we're playing. Maybe our whole role is just to move around, or to chop things down and eat things. And I don't know what our true role on the holistic perspective is. And so then you can just serve chaos. You can just say, well, maybe I'm just meant to stir the pot. And maybe I don't always have to know exactly. I was looking at the archetypes in a conversation with a friend today, between the fool and the magician. And I think both of those play into my life. And maybe the magician has more of a higher purpose, or is more meticulous and elegant with exactly what trick or illusion or mastery that he's weaving, and will go year after year to try and refine it. And the fool is just splashing and walking in and saying the thing, a lot more instinctual. But I think if you're leading with the mind, no matter how academic or smart you get, you're always at the limitation of our human ability to fathom the universal purpose. So when you bump up against that enough times, then I think, well, the only other way is through chaos and lunacy. And it's not irresponsibility, it's just saying that my human centric perspective cannot do anything worthwhile. So I'm just going to empty myself into the moment and trust that the divine pattern, if I pull out enough, there will be an objective design, and I'm not the one that has to curate what comes of my actions.
Yeah, interesting. So, well, what comes up for me when you touched a bit on it there, and you referred to it before as nihilism, this kind of, if you do explore the world in certain ways, you can reach that point where it does seem to lose all meaning. And it's certainly, and I think there's perhaps something of that built into everybody's life journey. It's part of your cycle that that's kind of available if you're willing to go on that journey. Because I've certainly been to that place where I got to the end of meaning, and then had to rediscover meaning in a different way, had to sort of get beyond that. And it was largely an imbalance of the mind for me. It was being two in the head. And the way I came through that was to drop down into my body and to go back into the body, and kind of, and realize that was like a doorway sideways, so that I could then get a different perspective and realize that a greater sense of meaning, which was just that things are as they are, and there's meaning in everything, and there are these different layers, as you're saying. There are patterns going on that I'm not aware of that involve me. And for sure, humans do exactly what the bees or the termites are doing, because I've experienced that here where I live in the woods, and I've seen the impact a human can have on the environment for the good of all life by creating habitat, by doing your day-to-day actions. If you're in a more natural landscape, but it happens in every landscape, in every setting, your day-to-day activities, your movement, your stirring of the pot of life has all these knock-on effects, and other life forms come in and fill the spaces and utilize the kind of remains of what you've done. And I really feel like everything is doing this. It's a reciprocal thing. Everything is doing this for everything else. And if there is a kind of awareness of that, it's maybe just a sense of, I mean, in other creatures or life forms, it's maybe just a sense of rightness. Like there is a rightness in this interconnectivity, in this web of life. And the more life is going on, the more plants, animals, insects, the richer it is, and the more connections there are, and the more right it feels. Um, that's certainly the sense I've got. I'm kind of almost 20 years into a journey into reconnection with the land here, and that's really the sense I'm getting. It's so nourishing as well, that awareness of and engagement with, full engagement, heart, body, mind, soul, full engagement with a place and all the life forms. It's so utterly nourishing and fulfilling in and of itself that you wonder why humans ever decided to create art galleries or motorbikes, or because there's so much just in what's already here. But of course it's part of who we are. It's part of our madness, our own kind of human genius fool combination, and other patterns that are playing out that are way beyond us that we're maybe not aware of. Yeah, yeah.
What you're talking about to do with the land just feels like the underlying principle of centropy, as opposed to entropy, where things lean in. Life supports other forms of life. It's this very collaborative kind of sense, which goes against this more nihilistic idea that everything's moving away from each other, and eventually there'll just be, we'll be stranded because we're all just rotting and eroding. And it also makes me think of a different place to make decisions from. You're talking about when you're two in your head and then you came into your body, and I call that sentience in the way that I've looked into the word being about feeling, as opposed to just, oh, it's a sentient creature, so we think it's smart or it's got consciousness. I think it's to do with the idea of feeling, and it's a feeling-based wisdom, and that is the effortless place. But we've got so many signs, we're so smart, we've got all the consequences we know, so we continually pull up to that more cerebral decision point. But I think you're right, it's effortless if we can just drop into the body. And we're so lucky to have so many different modalities and ancient techniques and things to draw on nowadays, where it's this holistic sense of spirituality drawn from many kind of traditions and lineages. And I also think of this idea of diversification, because you're talking about why do we make art galleries and motorbikes when we could just be in the woods, kind of thing. And a friend of mine was talking about the way that in times of plenty, we tend to diversify so that when the cataclysm strikes or there's the snap change in whatever, whether it be air pollution, our fertility, a new predator comes on the scene, or the environment, the climate changes, whatever, we naturally have something in us where some people want to go to the hills, some people want to go to the ocean, some people want to go outdoors, others want to go indoors, some people want to go organic, other people just get obsessed with technology. And it's this natural kind of spread. It seems we like our niches and our cliques and our nerd burrows to really go into that, so that when something does happen, there's enough of us that have gone farther enough away or farther enough into some particular skill set that we're equipped for the unknown. So that that kind of makes sense in that long-term survival context of society.
That adaptability and we're exploring all areas at once. Like if you look at us as one big life form, we're kind of feeling into all these cracks and crevices and up and down. And whatever we're constantly seeking, curious and playing, manipulating material things and moving stuff around and combining things, new things together. Yeah, it really is a time. It's very evident now that as our kind of Western culture dissolves and falls apart and consumes itself, as it's all kind of doing whatever it's doing right now, there's this incredible sense of space and opening up, and there's all this possibility and opportunity. And as you're saying, we're gathering in all these different resources from throughout history and combining them. You know, I'm seeing this a lot now and feeling it as well. The wisdom of kind of taking the best of all these things and exploring everything we have done, all these technologies of being that we've kind of picked up on our kind of collective exploration. And there seems to be a sort of recombining of things and a bringing together, and there's a resilience in that I instinctively feel. And that's one of the things that really fascinated me about what I've seen of what you're doing, is it really, I got a very strong signal of, oh, this is one of those things going on over there where this incredible resource is being built now. And these are the things, maybe these are the seeds of the next culture that's coming into being right now. You know, and it feeds on the corpse of the old one. It recycles the nutrients and the minerals and the elements, and enhances and maybe kind of goes a bit further and learns from the mistakes, hopefully. And yeah, I really feel like that's going on, and a lot of what's calling me in my life feels like that energy too. So when I see somebody else, even if they're doing something in quite a different way, it's so recognizable straight away, and I get excited because I can see the connection. It's like, oh, this is going on everywhere. These green
Yeah.
shoots are kind of appearing everywhere simultaneously in all different cultures, and that's super exciting because it inspires me that life is so potent and so unstoppable that, you know, all these kind of bad stories we've got about how we're destroying the earth and life, just, they're just stories, you know, and there are real elements to the damage being done, of course, but all the time life is pushing through, looking for a new way to be, and it's totally unstoppable. And that is very kind of inspiring and kind of hope giving.
Yeah, for me it reframes the idea of, love is the answer, love is all we need, which is of course like a banner and a song lyric that's been flown many times. But when I look into that word philia, to love, and there's, I can't, thermophilia, thermophiles or something, there's these little creatures right down deep in the ocean where the volcanic lava starts to spurt through, and who knows what temperature that's coming through it, but they love that temperature down there. It's hell for some, but for them it's like, oh, where they thrive. And it's this idea of, is conservation conservative? And it's, a contentious thing to talk about, particularly with climate change and all the politics and social feeling and emotion around that, understandably. But yeah, this idea you're talking about life is so resilient. I don't think it's that we worry about life going extinct. It's more like human beings might go extinct, but life is going to find a way. It's going to thrive. It's going to rebirth. And there is that, what I think they call the Overton window, that little frame of reality that we can accept as being real. And beyond that, we just almost are blind to it. We just don't see it. And our recorded history is a form of the Overton window, where we go, cool, well, we've got these particular plants, these particular animal species, these particular climate, temperatures recorded. We want to keep it there now. We've recorded it. And if it goes beyond that, it's just unreal to us, or it's the, Armageddon, end of the world. But being humble enough to see that our small little window is just a blip on the, tectonic plate shift of true eons and the true slow undulating heart monitor of the planet. And things might change a lot. They might get a lot colder, or a lot more of a particular chemical might come into the sky. But maybe there's another species that is dead right now, or dormant, because it's so inhabitable to them right now. And as we shift, that'll be their philia, their love. They'll, yes, and they will thrive, and it will sort of continue to evolve. So yeah, it's really hard to get one's head around what is natural and what is the human attempt at putting a yoke on the little bit of nature we understand, and say, like, stay there now, stay in that paddock, keep going around and around, because I've learned how to ride you in this paddock, and I don't want that fence to fall down.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's kind of it's there is a real paradox there, because I totally see it that way too, that all these things, nuclear power, pollution, these are all natural occurrences. Of course they are, because if they exist at all, the internet, ideas, these are all natural expressions of life in all
Mm.
its forms. There's this kind of niche that we're in, which is the human condition, that requires certain things to make it sort of bearable, enjoyable, productive, whatever. And those are the things that day to day I feel like it's worth working towards a good environment for that reason. It's better for me to spend time barefoot outside on the land, amongst the living, breathing world, than to be on a computer. It just feel, but it's not to say one is wrong or right. It's just there are these kind of compasses, and everybody has a slightly different compass, and it's just about finding the rightness for you, the fit for you, so that you can then be the thing, the element of life that you're supposed to be, and do that
Yes.
as well as you can. So there's
Mm.
always, the trap, of course, is that once you discover this thing for yourself, you think this is the thing and everybody else should be doing it. That's the kind of classic trap, isn't it? The
The
dictator's
mimetic
trap. It's
culture.
like, I know the best way, and everybody else is completely deluded. And,
And there's
that's
a pain
also,
that
it's
comes with it.
part of the journey though, isn't it? Is the kind of, you have to go through that. It's one of the stages of life, is to kind of
Mm.
realize, oh yeah, it's not true. There's much more going on than me.
Well, I think if you abstract that characteristic, it would be like, is it like a dandelion that spreads all the seeds out? It's that kind of, think between adolescence and maybe like your early to mid 20s. People can get very zealous, very self-righteous, very activists and political, and very certain and confident of a particular thing. But you need that tension. If you think of spreading that seed, it's not like, well, maybe I'll go this way, maybe I'll go that way. Say no. This
Yeah,
explosion of
yeah.
self-righteous confidence
Mm.
that is needed to then spread that seed, to commit, to push us forward. So I appreciate that. But as you say, then you mature and you start to have a bit more humility and see that maybe we aren't fully informed, and then maybe even if we are informed, that's just an opinion, and which is just a frame of mind, and does that really matter? And allowing everyone to go on their own particular path, and understanding, as you're saying, our way might not be everyone's way. We're all just a different mix and have different geniuses, and thankfully, so that we can have that diversity, and someone can be in a lab for 40 years, another person will be on the hill for 50 years, another person will be happy to be in a skyscraper. I'm really grateful that we are so strange and different, because I don't want to do all those jobs. I'm made for certain things, and certain things are really pleasurable to me. Like I love being on the road with just a backpack. I've got a bag just over there, which I've been throughout the world with. This here actually is a theater curtain that you can see it's hanging up there. It's a theater curtain that I found on the streets of Athens,
Hmm.
and that was in my backpack. And I've slept on a hill with it. I've taken it all through the world. It's been a prayer mat. It's been literally a theater set. All these sort of things, and I love that. I've existed on fumes monetarily and no money often. But for me, that's not hardship. It's for some reason, some composition of me is thrilled by that. But for other people, that would be so stressful, so much anxiety, not knowing where you're going to sleep, where you're going to eat, all that kind of thing. And so I think that's the most important thing, is not necessarily finding the right way and telling everyone about it, even though that's a nice part of our mimetic culture, where we do want to spread the truth and inform the tribe. Hey, there's poisonous berries over there, or fire's coming. Like, I appreciate that, but just really stilling down into the internal awareness, that internal journey, and activating the senses, which it makes sense for them to be plugged outside, because you want to know if there is a predator, or where the berries are. But once you've got enough of that grounded, which I think comes maybe in your 20s or whatever it is, then that's when we start to do more meditative practices, or a bit more contemplative, and there's this whole other deep listening that starts to come. And that points to what I think is the single malady of our modern culture. It's not listening to that integrity, that consciousness or conscience, which is starting to acquaint us with our particular constellation, our particular genius, which, or the etymology of that is the spirit that was attendant upon your birth. Like your particular alignment is made to gallop you. You do something majestically, effortlessly, without thought, you know. And so that for me is the task of this personal inquiry. And I like to even go further with that, to think that it's the only truth. Like reality is drugs. Like everything beyond this is just my warped interpretation of a bunch of signals, visual, sound, smell, and I'm reassembling the entire world. And however it gets done, you know, I'm like painting a picture of you. I'm interpreting the wavelengths, and who knows what else is actually out there. But I worked out what I collide with, what feeds me, what makes me feel good, and then I just make my own little home pack, just add water, self-inflating universe inside me. And therefore there's a stillness, because I think you don't have to trust the world beyond you. You don't have to know what's going to happen. Your friends or your partner could change religion, change political parties, you know, become treasonous, or lift a mask and be like, actually, I've been a sleeper spy all these years. You know, I'm not your parent, whatever. If you know yourself, then there's this calmness, because you can come and meet those, and you trust yourself even in the unknown. Even if someone breaks into your house or there's a flood, it's like, cool, well, I've gone in enough that I don't even need to know what's outside. I can walk with that, you know, blindfold on. And there becomes this bliss, which I've seen in like the Sufis, the more ecstatic, or those who walk the path of entheogenic, kind of like ecstatic, rapturous connection with the divine. There is this almost like a self-sacrifice in it, you know, almost like there's this word, and I haven't read the book, but there's a term a lot of people have been passing around, existential kink. And apparently it's a book, I haven't read it, but I like the concept of it, that it's all self-generated, and all our problems are just like a little friction edge that we actually relish in. And I think we can start to interpret all signals as bliss, as pleasure, because I think there's this really simple, you know, black, white, on, off, binary aspect of life, which is just simply pain and pleasure. Bring you towards things through pleasure and push you away from things with pain. But with the kind of training I do, it's trying to take off that prejudice of labeling those, and just more becoming an instrument. And so when you're, you know, having a cold shower, or doing branding or tattoo or piercing, or fasting and not eating, or being abstinent, not having sex and abstaining, and having that celibacy to internalize the sexual energy, or being angry and just dissolving it or sublimating it, like it evaporates into another form. There's that equanimity, which is very kind of, you know, Qigong, martial arts, Zen aspect of, it's actually just a signal. And then we internalize it and we relate to our subjective values. And if you're a fool and people are laughing at you, it's good points, it's pleasure. If you're a very well-spoken, important person giving a very meaningful speech and they're laughing, it's terrible, you know. And so it's the same signal. Or if I'm there in a river, naked, cold, I feel like, whoa, I'm aspiring to be a Viking. This is good. This is part of my training. I'm going towards my goals. So it actually, that one signal of cold turns into pleasure, because it relates to my beingness, which relates back to what I was talking about, the character. You know, the character I choose to play is this journeyman or this pioneer. So it associates with my tick box. But other people that are totally fine being in the metropolis and actually relish being, you know, worrying more about the clothes or manicure or being social, they'd happily screech and scream and have a terrible time camping. But that's because their values is aligned around a different beingness.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It's this kind of right relationship with what is that we're all kind of cultivating, or all the traditions are basically all saying the same thing. Is just, as you said there, it's first of all there are various techniques to just cleanse your instrument so that you're receiving the clearest signal of what
Yeah.
is, first of all, and then there is this, how do you relate to that internally? How do how do you kind of feedback, or create a feedback with that, where you're in some kind of harmonious relationship with the sensory information that keeps coming in of life, and
Mm.
finding that sort of harmonious um, way seems to be the kind of the teaching of most of the, if not all, of the great traditions of the world. And it really is the stories, the internal cultures that we have, that are the sources of the pain, truly, because as you
Mm.
say, everything is just signal, everything is just data,
Mm.
actually. And then it's interpreted. Pain is a very interesting one, because I mean, they're all different kinds of pain: physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual. There are so many layers to pain, but they're all just different signals. And I remember I really learnt this through my body quite early on, because at some point, and I don't quite remember why, at some point when I was going to the dentist to have a filling or something, I decided, oh, I don't want the injection that numbs my jaw, because I just didn't like that whole numbness thing, and it goes on for quite a while afterwards. So, I thought, well, how bad can it be? So I went and had my filling, all the drilling, and I realized that as it was happening, I was just kind of observing, well, what is pain? It made me ask that question: what actually is pain? And what are the kind of flavors and colors of pain?
Mm.
And in that instance, the pain was so exquisite and so intense when it got sort of down to the bottom and was hitting like nerve endings or whatever it was. It was so high and refined and pointed, the pain, that it actually became something else. It was just like electricity, or I don't know, but I realized then that, okay, it's just a sensation, it is, and I do physically react to it, and it's super intense, it's the most
Mm.
intense pain I felt. However, I may be, just a personal kind of makeup of me, perhaps I'm better suited to kind of intense, fast pain, rather than a sustained, like a migraine or something, that's just this kind of
Mm.
throbbing, relentless, that kind of pain is much more challenging for me. But it was a
Mm.
real lesson. It was a real lesson in,
Mm.
pain is just sensation. And then you choose how to kind of create the story around it. So is it a terrible experience or not? Is
Mm.
it awful pain, or is it exquisite? And I use that word because it somehow was the closest I could get. It almost suggests that there's something beautiful and
Mm.
great about it. And I wouldn't say I enjoyed it. It didn't give me pleasure, but it was so precise and refined and on a whole other level that seemed to be the right word. Yeah.
Amazing.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean that's an intense experience, and I think when you do training that takes you to those kind of heights or depths, coming back to normal life, everything seems more confrontable. It's like, well, I've done that. You went to a dentist without anesthetic, or did whatever else that one might do. Then, like talking to a stranger or working an extra hour back at work or whatever it is, running for a few blocks because you missed your bus, whatever, become really doable. And yet, those can be the huge hurdles that can paralyze us in the modern world when we're so used to having all these signs and wayfinding systems and safety nets. So I think it's really important to find our own edges. It could be as extreme as that or whatever people's next area of growth is. But I think that beyond the experience itself, what it does is it allows us to remain as the lesson unpacks. Richard Rudd with the Gene Keys talks about the shadow is the raw material of the gift. So these places that feel uncomfortable or confronting or that we'd often avoid, we're doing ourselves a disservice. Joseph Campbell says the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek.
Mm.
So just being with it a little bit longer,
Mm.
being present, not in a masochistic martyr way, but just to be able to be on that threshold and witness the learnings and the self-awareness and the truths that unpack. I think for me, that's one of the key things, is just bearing witness. And this will build our empathy. It'll change our social dynamic with our stranger. It'll allow us to also see, the emperor's clothes, see when leaders and politicians, and it's been proved in history that the people's or the will of the people and the benefit of all is not always held at the conference table or at the boardrooms or at the decision offices of these people that have power. We've seen it so many times through history, but I think it's hard for us to sometimes confront that it's happening right now. But it's all about perception. If we're willing to face our own traits, our ego, the things that we've done, the times we've violated our own ethics, or the temperature in the room, or whatever it is, that's, I think, the training wheels to then face externally and overhear that racist comment in the pub and not just put the horse blinkers on and go, oh, I'm going to turn and face that. I don't know what they're going to do. It's uncomfortable, but I need to actually be present with this. And I think that alone, not even having to do something, that's the pacifist way. It's not about being an aggravator or being a rebel or a terrorist or doing something harmful against the things we don't like, but just being present with the things we don't like. I think there's a huge power in the witness, and we look in quantum physics and the twin slit experiment and the effect of the observer on reality itself. I think if we just do that, and then we don't have to worry about the consequences, the repercussions, because we don't even have to take responsibility for taking an action or catching the ball when it's thrown. Just show up and look.
Yeah, that's probably one of the most profound and simple thing. Well, I say simple, but not necessarily easy, shall we say?
Mm.
That is one of the most profound things that anyone can do ever. Is just practice being the witness, like showing up, seeing what it is, not reacting, not making a decision, not nothing. Just really, what is it? What actually is it? Not what I think it is,
Yeah.
or imagine it is, or what it could be, or what's it going to turn into. No, what is it right now? What is it? And what are those feelings? What actually are those feelings in your body? What are they? Not how do they add or create a story or a reaction, but what is it? Where do I feel that?
Mm.
Discomfort. Oh, it's, starting. That's a powerful thing that I've kind of, I'm very much a beginner. I'm always trying to cultivate these things, but just noticing how it lands on me physically when something happens. Oh, that's where
Mm.
I feel that thing when something like that happens. What is that?
Mm.
Just looking at it. Not how can I stop that? How can I make it go away? How can I feel differently? But just
Mm-hmm.
what is it? I remember noticing that, or having a revelation at some point, that the sensations I was feeling when I was anxious were the same sensations that others might be feeling when they were excited. And it was just a label I was giving it, that actually, if you had a different relationship to those sensations, it could be excitement for you. And that was mind blowing. It was like, oh, they're just a set of sensations, and I have a story attached and a whole kind of set of responses in the storeroom that I get out when I feel it. But what if I just left all of that and just looked at the actual sensations,
Mm.
and just became familiar with them?
Mm.
Um, and we probably have some common ground with, you talked about the cold shower. This is something I do every morning. I've made a really nice little space out under, there's these huge pine trees, really straight and tall, and I've made a kind of log stacked little kind of enclosure,
Mm.
and I have just the hose just up in a hazel tree, and every morning I get up and I go out and have my shower, and there's something about that whole experience, which initially was very difficult to do because of all the stories about, oh, it's gonna be freezing, and it's January, and and it's cold. The wind's blowing. It is cold, but there's something about doing that, as well as all the kind of obvious physical and health benefits that I'm already perceiving after having done it for a couple of years. But there's just something relating to what you said about, by having that experience right at the start of the day, I've already overcome a kind of adversity. And so everything else does seem a little easier. It's like, well, the tax return, how difficult can a tax return be? I've just gone
Other
out
than
in
the
February
shower
in
and
an
the
easterly
window.
wind and had a shower and, been naked. So there's definitely something in that. It stretches that capacity, doesn't it? What talk a bit about your experiences with that, because I sense a fellow cold showerer here. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, yeah. I mean, for me, it's all about being willing to experience life and not brace against it. And
Mm,
it's expanding that Overton window on a personal scale. It's being a more of a channel or a vessel, because life, of course, has more volts or whatever life units you want to measure it in than a single human can receive and absorb. But it could be a spontaneous moment to dance. It could be to stand up and say something important. It might be just sitting still and witnessing someone where they're going to get up and, recite a poem. It could be whatever it is. My aspiration is to try and have this instrument so it's got an expanded capacity to receive life,
mm.
and also similarly to let life go, which could come through venting rage. It could come through a song. It could come through whatever it is. So yeah, cold showers for me have been something I've done for many years. And I remember when I was young, would have been about 6 or 7, going down to a place called Dolstrom in South Africa. And that was very Scottish kind of weather. And my dad going out and swimming in the lake. And I think as a young boy, you look to your dad for behavior. And I was like, oh, that's what you do. Doesn't matter if it's cold. Doesn't matter if you don't know if there's fish in there or whatever, or a Loch Ness monster. You just swim in it. And so I jumped in after him and I swam. So I think that was kind of this instilling bit of a New Zealand farm boy kind of attitude of like, oh yeah, get out there, get amongst it. Um, but that's led to a whole lot of techniques in open world gymnasium, which I call threshold release techniques. I also call it the yin path to yang, because it's not just about surrendering in a fawning kind of I've been overcome by life. It's this dissolving of the resistance, because often the resistance is more painful than the experience we're trying to resist. And there's this amazing physiology which does protect us. It has these certain circuits which you will go unconscious of certain things if it is too much. And I've felt so many times. I've also had cold showers in winter, and the periphery, maybe the body temperature shrinks into your torso, but after that, everything is a lot more manageable. The cold winds don't sort of hit me as strong. And for me, any system, in order for it to be well, needs to flow. So I
Mm.
think it's about that regulation as well, the cold and the hot. It's about, yeah, just that fluidity. I'm
That's
just
a,
feeling into the different moments I've had like that. And I think it reminds me of breath work as well, when you do rebirthing breath work and you come to that death, in Buddhist um, approach to death is to die before you die. You kind of rehearse that letting go. And so it's just a little part of that. Every time you have this mental brace against life, which is really hemming yourself in, die to it, and you realize on the other side of death is more life.
yeah, that's such an important part. I mean, we'll get into more of what it is you're actually doing, the kind of the detail of that. But you've touched on something really important. You talked about it earlier. Instead of kind of retracting, holding on, clenching, it's a softening and receiving. Um, Puts me in mind of Aikido, which is something I practice,
Mm.
which is all about receiving the energy of the attack, not fighting it, not clashing, not closing up, but actually breathing it in and just
Mm.
diverting it, like through
Mm.
the use of curves, circles, through
Mm,
these kind of natural shapes, these kind of taut
beautiful.
shapes. You're kind of taking that attacking energy and transforming it through your practice
Mm,
into a kind of neutralized, or you even receive the energy, and you can kind of energize yourself with that energy at
mm,
the same time as neutralizing it. But
right.
that's such a kind of important physical metaphor for everything you're talking about there. It's this, you are soft and receiving, and it is that yin energy, but it's not cowering, it's not defeated. It's a
Mm,
very, and you do it beautifully, and you're doing it all the time. You sort of physically show what you're talking about as you're saying it. This is a great thing for people to notice. Atlas is a master at embodying his words, I'm realizing. And you're constantly doing, you're teaching that way. You're sort of showing people how you do it. And
mm.
it really is, that's how it's done. It's fascinating. Talk a bit about like the actual practices, maybe break down some of the different techniques you have,
For
methods.
sure.
I know you've got these different categories as well.
Mm.
um, Maybe talk a bit about what they are, and perhaps if you want to say something about how you kind of found all these things or put them together or something of
Mm.
that story. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invitation. Yeah, yeah. When I was growing up, I assumed I was ascending the ranks of a well formed society. I thought that elders and wise men and geniuses had formed a really great mechanism or system that I just had to learn. And then I would graduate and I would contribute to it. And I think most of us would just contribute to society and be really good citizens if it was a really good system. Like we want to be a part of it. We want to learn. We love learning, actually. There's a lot of pleasure in it. And we want to contribute and belong. But then I started to realize that there was a lot of lies, a lot of unnecessary destruction, a lot of confusion. A bit disappointed. I was like, all right, cool. Um, where is that mastery and nobility? And I saw some of it in martial arts. But then when I was studying martial arts, I tried out a few different forms. So I did karate for a few years as a kid. And then I found a form called Yunjungdo. Grandmaster Jung was the chairman of the techniques committee of Taekwondo. And he's from Korea. But he felt it had gone too much down the sports tangent of, punching in a sports arena, getting a trophy. So he called it a human art rather than a martial art. So I practiced that for a few years, and I really got the idea of it needed to be paired with philosophy and other aspects to be an actual martial, what would be traditionally called a martial art, rather than a sports art. So I eventually came up with what I call open form, which is my tattoos, which is about, I guess, inspired by Jeet Kune Do and Bruce Lee, the formless form. And for me, it's about let our structures and even our morals to some degree, our social structures, our economies bend to serve the purpose of their function. For hospitals to have the purpose of wellness, for prisons to have the purpose of rejuvenation and rehabilitation, for economics to have the purpose of distributing resources so that the base level of our Maslow's hierarchy of needs is taken care of, and not serve or be a slave to some particular kind of structure. And so I came up with this idea of what I would call a martial art, having these 5 pillars of a spiritual practice, a physical practice, a creative art, a healing art, and a form of service. So my artistry is kind of like taking a martial arts approach to the creative arts. So I call us art martials, just to play with martial arts. And I feel like it's a narrative. I'm very aware as a theater director and as an actor and as a writer, as a poet, I'm very aware of the important use of story in our culture. And I also distinguish between culture and society. I think society is more the man-made thing and culture is more the organic thing that happens on a street level with us through our music and our food and the way we dress and just all that kind of thing. But we're very aware of story at that superconscious level and subconscious level. Even if we don't realize it, we're sort of programming each other and passing things on. And I'm aware of a particular character that's coming through and a particular social story. And actually, for a long time, I've looked forward to the apocalypse. You know, it's playing out at the moment in various ways. And I'm fascinated. I'm not sure if, you know, art imitates life, or is life, we're just like so determined to make this happen that we're doing it because we've seen it in our sci-fi movies and our books for so many decades. But there's a character which I position somewhere in the outlands. They all wear black, and I've seen it in other movies, you know, wearing hoods, being kind of like assassin-like characters, being hackers, being a bit emo and a bit like cynical, but heart-led. You know, there's a particular qualities. They're very rebellious and okay with death, and yeah, there's a particular character that I feel is ancient, but is pertinent to the modern social upheaval that's happening. And open world theater is an order. It's a creative order of people that want to live a more monastic life as they approach creativity and beauty and expression, and having, like you're talking about the anesthetic. You know, if you look at the word anesthetic, it's an, which is against, and aesthetic, to feel. So the aesthetics are the arts. I think the arts are the aesthetics which help us feel. And we are training the body, you know, like what do they say, the body of a warrior and the mind of a monk. Like we're training these bodies as instruments, but so not to harden ourselves, not to be stoic and not feel, but so that we can feel everything. Because artists just tear themselves apart. We fall in love deeply. We see the harrowing situation of humanity. Like we feel it all. That's how we can distill it down into a poem or a song, or we can fall apart on stage or screen. It's because we do feel. So it's a diligent devotional way towards arts so that we can experience life first and foremost. And then in times that we choose to pass it on, we translate it through our artistry as a form of prayer. That is that in fact I witnessed life and I'm like saluting, like, wow, this happened, so that we can actually relate the overwhelming situation of being human and being mortal and being surrounded by the intricacies of nature, which we can't fully understand the genius and the design of, and trying to make sense through our senses, not through our mind. Make sense. You know, it's even in the word, like make sense of it. And so the way that I've broken it down is through these orbits. So the first orbit is the orbit of becoming. You know, in the beginning there was the word. It's from nothing into something. And so I've split it into these two lenses. And the first lens is no one. Can we detox, get rid of ourselves, get rid of our clothes, our identity, our preferences, fast, sit in a dark room, not speak for 24 hours, you know, just come back. It's unlearning. And particularly in a society which is consumer driven and capitalist about acquisition, I need to get my success. For me, it's like, no, we're saturated. We know so much, we have so much, we're bloated, we're overweight, we're getting clots, we can't breathe, we're just like paranoid and just clogged. Like, let's just get rid of it. And so that's when we do all these the breath work and the authentic communication and stillness, moving meditations, Tai Chi inspired, play Chi as I call it. And then from there, we go into the visioning. So once you've cleared the blank slate, we go into the superhuman. And we start to play in superhero school. I try to read your mind, or telekinesis or telepathy, or whatever it is, like go into the impossible and dare. And whether I can levitate this lifetime or not, I just gesticulate that maybe I will start a little neural pathway that in several generations' time might eventuate in something kind of cool. Let's at least try it. Let's come back to an innocent revelry of possibility rather than being so smart that we don't even try and open that door because we know it's locked. So that's the first orbit. From becoming, we come into beholding. And so you could think of these almost like martial arts belts. And my aspiration is to land a place here, which is a mixture between a martial arts dojo, a yogic ashram, a wellness spa, and an art studio all combined. And so once you've trained in that orbit, you go to the next one, which is beholding, which is the two lenses of the creature and the architect. So the creature is all about being corporal and mucky and play fighting and elemental immersions, going in the cold water, having burials, which we do when you're breathing from underground, even becoming okay with your own body fluids, your feces, urine, blood, spit, semen, just being okay with being this, because that's a fact as we are, you know, like let's touch our toes at least and not just pack them away and spray deodorant on them. And then the architect is a similar embodiment, but on the world around us. So what effect does the lighting have, or the shape of the room? Let's create labyrinths and have walks of meaning, or these kind of things. And then once we've done that kind of landscape gardening of our life, and that spatial design, then we come down into the artistry, which is the orbit of bemusing. And I've split art up into two aspects. One is the censor, and one is the mythologist. So the censor is just about receiving beauty, taste, smell, touch, texture, just becoming a recipient point for beauty and for sensation without having to make it mean something. And then the mythologist is the storyteller. We are the directors and the magicians, and we will like bring you into a story and saying, so here we are. And we'll be able to, you know, inflate a world of our making and be a tour guide through fancy. And so once we've done that, I feel we've got all of the baseline skills to then take it into the world beyond the workshop space. And that's when I send you out on a pilgrimage. So that's the archetype of the journeyman. And you're starting to step towards the next orbit, the orbit of belonging. So once you've gone on your self-assigned pilgrimage or rites of passage initiation, which I think we're sorely lacking in the modern world, you've pit yourself against reality. Then you have sort of earned your stripes, and you can hold a sacred space for other people as the celebrant. So within that orbit of belonging, we have the celebrant and the game master. So the celebrant acquaints people with the sacred, with the subtle, which can just bear witness. And then going through the game master, it's about leadership, and it's about questioning the laws or the social values and the tribalism that, you know, in spiral dynamics, you might have it down. I think it's, what meme is that? It's the beige meme or something, like one of the lower ones, or the purple, where we're very dogmatic and starting to ask people to invent a new game, or this idea of game A and game B. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but this terminology of game B is, well, what is the alternative game? And I really want to walk amongst titans, amongst leaders, innovators, teachers, healers, artists, you know, like I want self-realized people as friends. I love being amongst powerful people. And so that's really the final sort of section. And after that, you step out. There are two, I call them the orbit of annex, which is looking at additional areas of technology and nature, which aren't necessarily the central line, but it's getting into designing systems, whether that be through technology and coding and new media arts, or permaculture and horticulture and fermented foods and all these kind of things. So it's like nature and technology are these kind of wings of the practice. But all of these have these three parts of embodiment, creativity, and questing. So you have an experience in that particular area. And then after having that experience, you bring it through to an art form which translates the experience you had. And then you task yourself with implementing that in the real world. How can you go and share that with others, or bring it to society, or walk the path? So that's my system. That's the orbits, the open world orbits. And I really hope that it reconnects people with the innate artistry, because I don't think that you are even an artist. I think you're just an expressed human. Like, we're born with a violin in our throat and feet that are made for dancing, you know, like it's just part of an extension of a feeling. It naturally will come out, and we want to speak, and we'll cry, and we'll sing, and we'll paint. And it's, for some reason, been through the taxonomy of our over-categorized world, we want to, oh, those special people, artists, and we'll give you a trophy, put you on a stage, we'll bang a buzzer and get you off stage if you're not good enough. And it's very scary. And there's all this kind of codification of music into the stave and the musical dots and things, which is intimidating. But you know, kids strum and sing and hum and dance. And so that's the aspiration, is to sort of, as I say, unframe art, take it out of the museums and the galleries and just bring it into life, and untame artists so that their true wilderness and naturalness becomes a beacon for everyone else. Because even if you're not trained in healing or any of these modalities, it doesn't matter. You can recognize when someone's being authentic. And we've got the mirror neurons. We're like, oh, you're so open in the heart. Like, I'm relieved just being around you. Oh, I get it. You know, that's where the memes actually come into a really medicinal form, is if you can become an embodiment and an example of permission for someone else to be themselves too.
Wow, sounds great. So really, it's this is what schools should be like, right? Every kid should be going through a process much like the one, if not just like the one you've described there. Imagine a world, and I'm sure you have, full of people that have gone through that kind of journey at that stage in life, and then you let those people out into the world and just watch the magic. Imagine the kind of power to do good and create and invent. um, it's just immense. I mean, this it really touches deeply with a vision I hold for the world. And it's fascinating to sort of see and hear somebody else's version of that, or how you've it's very beautifully put together. I like these orbits that you have. And it clearly speaks of a long journey of acquiring experiences and knowledge, and seeing things, and sort of thinking, oh yeah, that we'll have a piece of that and some of that. And what to talk a little bit about maybe how you got to this point, because this is something that's obviously been kind of growing in you for quite some time, perhaps. uh,
Yeah.
I'm guessing, but tell us a bit about that, because it's
Mm.
fascinating that I think also for others to sort of hear how something like this comes into being, because we're all familiar with different models and different ways and different teachings and different cultures and traditions. And it might be quite interesting for people just to hear how new ones get born.
Mm,
Mm,
for sure. I like the saying that we teach what we need to learn.
mm,
And I think that's very much been my path. I remember the first time I ever ran a workshop was because I went to the workshop of a guy called Morganix, who'd done a lot of community work and really served the art scene in Australia and still does. And he ran a freestyling workshop. And I went there for the first time. I was like, oh, I know this from doing all the improvisation training I've done for years. But he was moving on. He was going out to Darwin or wherever he was going. And so I just had that hit. And I've always had this feeling of the importance of serving the potential connections that often get lost when you don't talk to a stranger or don't say that thing. It's just always been in my body. It's like there's almost like this moral obligation to step into that and express it. So I just said, who would like to do this every week? And two people put up their hands. Uh, and I said, okay, cool. Well, I'll create a space and we're just going to start doing this. And the first week I hired Glebe Town Hall and I put up some posters for a thing called Outspoken. And the first week, one person came. It wasn't either of those two people that put their hand up. It was some other person who'd seen the poster. And the second week, no one came, just me and a speaker and instrumental beats. But over the months, there was this real regular group of people. And not that I profess to be the person that started all of these groups, but there was people like Joel Rappaport, who started Big Village, and there was Tucker from the Fundamentals, and there was Missy, who's now got the Nest Creative Space in Redfern and Sydney. Like there was some fairly instrumental people that went on to shape the art scene and music scene in Australia. And we used to jam and cipher, which is freestyle, jam, rap, poetry, spoken word, every Saturday in that space. So that's kind of an example of one of the many instances of just feeling like there's something that should be there. And I think so many of us have this feeling. It doesn't have to be utopia. It's just a harmony, like, oh, it'd be nice if this happened every week, and it's not going to happen. Oh well. But I know what, just step up and do it. And through doing that every week, I put together a whole curriculum, and you can now buy it. It's a 50-page book called Outspoken with all of the techniques that we created over that year of doing that. So it's just realizing, and Steve Jobs once says in an interview that, the world was made by people no smarter than you.
mm.
It's like taking people off the pedestal and realize that the extension of the thinking can be in the doing. That we've got this human-centric concept of I need to figure out the solution and all the consequences and safeguard myself and make sure that it's appropriate time and before I do anything.
It's
And
crippling,
so,
right?
yeah.
Mm,
So it's just like that's where the fool and the clowning comes in. It's like, be the crash test dummy, get it wrong, be the first one to get it wrong, because, we stand on the shoulders of giants. Another quote I really love. There's so many amazing things that form the foundation. Like, here we are speaking on this
Yeah,
computer, this laptop. There's just
incredible.
already so much laid. And even if we fall flat on our face, we're already miles high above the previous rock bottom. So we can't really get it wrong. And you might be an inspiration, or spur a tangent, but someone else needs to see you do it to have that tangential inspiration, which they'll finally get it right. And also, as you start to do, that's part of the cognition. Oh, I get it. No, that actually should be here, but you needed to see it outside of your mind before you could reposition it. And so that's what I've been doing. I did Outspoken, and from there I started a freestyle battle called Dumb It Down. And then from there, I wanted to turn off the music because I couldn't hear all the words. So I started doing spoken word poetry, and I toured that for a while. And then I was sick of just telling people about these things I saw. I wanted to show them. So I did a degree in graphic design and communication design. And then I got sick of the things just being inert on a page or on a billboard. I wanted them to move. So I did professional game development. And then I didn't want to just like push things around. I wanted to bring the sentience through the coding. So I started a Bachelor of Computer Science. And then I wanted those sentiences to be in a living space. So I started a Master's of Interaction Design and Electronic Art. I haven't finished those last two, but I'm sort of on the path with those. So it's just kind of, but I didn't know the industries or how I wanted to apply the art forms until I started. And now I have this very comprehensive idea of what open world theater is. Like an open world video game, you can go in all directions, you can engage with everyone, and that's how life actually is. Reality is an open world game. And so my games, my theater, and my modalities are really just training wheels for life. And it's unavoidable to do all the things that I do. Like, I can't get you to go and speak authentically if you're not connected with your breath.
Yeah.
And I can't get you to go and quest if you're not proficient in martial arts, and you can't just squat and defecate in a hole somewhere, because I don't know if you're always going to be near a toilet. Like, it's inextricable. So kind of by having focus, I ended up diversifying simply to serve the one end of
Mm-hmm.
playing life.
And well, I think important to flag up what you were saying right at the start, because this to me is a key part of anything surviving or becoming a thing at all, is that perseverance at the beginning of being there that time when there's one person, and the discomfort of that and the challenges of that, and then being there the second time when nobody shows up, and then even harder turning up the next week after having nobody show up and doing it again. That, if nothing else, I feel like in all of our lives we can all relate to those moments where we just stayed at it and gave it a little bit more, even though it felt like it was swimming against the tide or it wasn't going to happen. We just showed up again, and sure enough, you get the reward. And it seems to be just an essential part of the story, doesn't it? That kind of, and it just takes that tenacity and that courage to show up and get it wrong, be, the embarrassment of one person being there, and the sort of, and the kind of the self-esteem attack that comes from nobody being there, and all of those things, having to like be in that place and yet still hold on to the vision, because if the vision is true, if the vision is right, if it feels right, then there will be a way, and you'll find the way to get it out there. I wanted to just focus on that, just because I know that you can say it because you've done it, and once you've done that a few times, you kind of just know that intuitively and do it anyway. But for people who haven't had that experience, that's probably the biggest obstacle that kills most things is, oh, nobody, even on the first thing, like maybe not enough people came, or it wasn't as good as you thought it was going to be. Oh, I better not do that then. That it's such an easy thing to get derailed at the start when you're at your most fragile, and just like a little seedling, it only takes a little event to kind of knock it over or to crush it, or it's a very tender stage. Yeah, yeah.
And I'm there right now again. I've done this overseas. in different countries, but now I've come back to New Zealand and I'm starting here again. And I'm feeling that same sort of thing. I'm wanting to land this space and wanting to, create this community and have a physical space to train, and just feeling that, it's not selling out and all the tickets aren't going, or, but I know it. And you were talking about the story, and it's so important. This is why I've started to look at my life in scenes,
Mm-hmm.
like to live a life worth telling.
Mm.
And you sort of become objective and you see, well, this is really beautiful. It's not just about the highlights or that montage at the end when the room's full and it's all high fives and success. It's like, it's such a touching moment.
Mm.
Not me being myself right now, but a human, in this case it's me or whoever, is trying to bring something really beautiful through to the world. And they're the only one in the room. No one showed up. It's like, that's an amazing scene.
Mm. Mm.
And I think if we can start to look at the artistry of those things, it's not just what we are programmed into thinking of success, but it's the beauty of a human attempting something majestic, attempting. If we all did that thing, if we've all got one of them, there's some like little beautiful part of humanity, or generosity or selflessness or just a random act of kindness or whatever it is. But if we all just gently put it out, there'd be so many little stories. And who knows, maybe only the gods will get to enjoy the play or the movie of our lives. But I choose, there's just a device, but I choose to see life like that in scenes, and trust that there is beauty in the failed endeavor and the quaintness. Because I don't think human beings are impressive and majestic. Like whales are impressive. And there's so many, like thunderstorms are majestic. And, there are cataclysmic events which are like, whoa, that was like Hollywood special. But in general, human beings are quaint. We're very small, we're kind of quiet. And in these cathartic releases, someone might get naked or shout, rah! But after a few seconds, they're exhausted. It's like that little bit of voltage that you've been protecting the world from for all these years, you've been caging in, you've been, getting unhealthy and sick from holding in, was released in under a minute.
Mm.
And the walls didn't collapse, and I'm right here, I'm fine. So I don't think it is the Hollywood boom, I saved my nation kind of superhero narrative. It's just not in our DNA. It's not what we're made of. So I think if we can start to recalibrate our instrument of success with the human scale, it happens slow, it happens bit by bit, day by day. And it's beautiful that someone showed up to a town hall to give their gifts and no one came. And they sat in an empty hall thinking, oh, maybe half an hour, maybe two. No, I should be here for the time I thought I'd be here. And then the gentle click as I put back the speaker, unplugged the thing, and then apologetically went past the lady at the front and said, okay, thanks, I'll see you next week. Like that's
Yeah,
art.
yeah, yeah. It's such a beautiful way of seeing it. I mean, a great device to take yourself outside of yourself and look at the scene and see the beauty of that. Oh, this is that bit in the film where it looks like it's not going to work, but it's that magical bit just before something happens, and telling yourself that story, then
Yeah.
you actually inhabit the story in and kind of bring into being the possibility of the next part of the story, of the next scene. You've already got some momentum there to
Mm.
kind of write the next scene. And, if nothing else, it could be like the spring being sort of recoiled and compressed. You had to
Mm.
go into that sort of place to then poof, launch out. Something like that. There's always something in the way that you were saying before, that beautiful phrase about the shadow. I forget how you termed it, but it's that the thing of
Raw material for the gift. Yeah.
exactly the raw material for the gift that this thing contains within it. This thing that you're looking for. You just have to kind of process it, or be in it, or be with it. So that moment was absolutely necessary. That contained some raw material that was required for the thing to actually become something.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to do that first. You couldn't just shortcut to the other bit, because it wouldn't be made properly. It would be on a
Mm.
shaky foundation. So
Mm.
it's such a beautiful way to see it. I love that. I really do. I'm going to use that myself. That kind of I'm going to be, the audience in the cinema looking at the scene, the sort of head down, sort of feeling the pain of nobody showed up, but then
No.
knowing what was coming, because everybody does know. They know how the story goes, right? It's so deep in us, that
Mm.
story. All the stories have a kind of a rhythm like that, don't they? The greatest
God
stories
is a
do.
DJ.
They're
Totally.
essential.
Yeah,
Yeah, beautiful.
definitely.
I like that.
And one other technique which I really use a lot, I call billboarding. And this is a way that we don't just always stick to our first inspiration, but we let it move us. So I remember when I was going across America, I went across from New York to LA, not using any money. And I got this real universal literacy. I could start to read the space I was in, or, I think the mind is an amazing pattern recognition machine. Whether it was, the universe talking to me, or I just chose to pick out the parts I wanted to see, there'd be strange things would happen. Like I remember once a truck was coming around the corner, and this newspaper rolled off the back of it and bounced towards me and ended up at my feet. And there was like a headline that related to something that I'd just been doing. Or like these really interesting things started to happen when you really put your attention outwards. And billboarding for me was when I would see literally a billboard or some kind of signal, and like, oh, I'm going to go there. So I'd start to walk towards the billboard, and way before I got there, my eye would be caught by another alleyway. Oh, and actually, I need to go down that way. But I couldn't have seen the alleyway if I hadn't started walking towards the billboard. So similarly with a project, you might, like me, want to start a thing, and sometimes there's beauty in the scene when no one showed up. But maybe it was a billboard. Maybe it was just to get you starting to advertise or showing up at a place. And then maybe you do need to deviate and drop that billboard and go towards the other thing, but just be looking on the way as well. Because I love this speech by Jim Carrey at the Vedic University or something like that, where he said, ask the universe for what you want, start working towards it, and let go at how it comes to be.
Mm.
So, you've got this clear vision, start working towards it. But then after that, it's the dance of chaos, just surf it and always be looking for that other alleyway in case there's another trajectory.
Yeah, it's a collaborative process. It's a creative act between you and the universe. So you've got your vision, but you can't do it on your own, and it can't exist in your head. So you have to then take it and say, here it is. What have you got? And it will give you something back. And then you take that and you do the same thing. And again and again, it's a feedback loop, isn't it? It's that process of, yeah, just letting go. Like, okay, I've got the intention, I've got the idea. Now, how I get there, just let it go. You don't need to know that. And, this is something I've struggled with many times of trying to work it all out before I do it. And it just suffocates you and it's stillborn, because that's not how it's supposed to be. Because it's
Yeah.
much bigger. You're just a seed, your idea is a seed. It requires the whole context to bring it into being, and that's outside of you, and it's an essential part, so
Yeah, play your part in the dance, and
mm,
and whatever excuse you need, whatever. And this is another point when I'm training people, I really ask them to ask themselves, what do you have reverence for? Because if you find your point of reverence, it can overpower all the pain of failure. It's like, you'll sing to your child on the birthday because sure, you might sound bad or you might be embarrassed in front of your friends, but your love for your child is so great that it will overpower the possible failure or fear. So if, like in life, if you have this point of reverence, whatever it is for you, that can just be the extra little nudge to get you in motion. And I think that's the main thing, just stay in motion. Every kind of excuse, every chance, every inspiration, any kind of inkling, just take action on it and then die to it. Because, like I said, with the bee or the termite, who knows what our true role is? But I do think it's to add some ripples to the pond and let someone else surf it or turn it into a wave or run a wind turbine off it. I don't know. Like, I don't know what it's there to do, but that's where the chaos comes in. It's just create, create, create.
mm,
Mm. Mm.
yeah, well, that was great. Thank you so much. So rich, so rich, so much in there. I mean, so much, and I know we've only just kind of scraped the surface of what you're doing, um,
That's good.
but it was a good introduction.
Honored
Yeah,
to be
it's
here
very
listening.
inspiring.
Mm.
It's really inspiring. I'm so glad there are people around the world doing things like what you're doing there. Um,
We are. We're all,
you
yeah.
know, it's super exciting, and if nothing else, it just shows you, or it shows me, just how much there is out there, and how many kind of materials there are to play with, and this whole idea of life. You know, life is a story, is a play, is a film, is a work of art. It's all of those different things. You can have bits of any of it or all of it, or it's possibility. There's so much possibility, and
I love possibility. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And
way,
I'd love
way, way
to.
beyond anything we can imagine. You know, there's just so much of it, and it's such a
And we
great
won't get to
feeling.
see it all. We don't even get to see, like, as the tree drops its seeds and the bird eats it and shits it out somewhere else and another tree. You don't always get to see how your fruit sprout, but just trusting the syntropy, the symbiosis, the network effect. Um, and I just wanted to leave by extending a call to action for also definitely for yourself. Like, I'd love to be played by you, but I do have this game called Vicarious, where any listener or anyone who's viewing this or receiving this at any time can play me as a human avatar in the game of life. So that's definitely there. Check it out at openworldtheatre.com, or I think it's called vicariousgame.com. But basically, you jump on a Zoom call like this. The camera is my body cam, and you're in my ears, and then we go out and we really start to put this to the test, just to see if you can play life as a game. So I'd be honored. Yeah, definitely, if you would play
I'd love
me.
to
And
do it. I'm up. I'm on. Yeah,
yeah,
let's do it.
great.
This is we didn't get into this. This is such a fascinating thing.
It's
I
a
mean,
whole other thing,
it's
but
super
yeah,
exciting. You know, we'll do that. We'll definitely do that. Yeah,
fun, man.
well, there'll be in the information, all your details and links and stuff will be there. So
Appreciate
yeah,
that.
brilliant. I mean that, yeah,
Cool.
gaming life in that way, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, good luck with it all, and we'll definitely do that soon. We'll make a date for the game, and maybe I can
Yeah.
just put that on here, and we'll relay the results of that. Yeah.
Great.
All right.
All right.
Thank you very much. Take
Big
care.
love on it.